Oh my goodness, welcome to World Values Day. It is the 20th of October 2022 and we are back in Tauranga launching World Values Day. I'm here with Robin Hannah and from Rotary Tauranga. And why are we doing this in Tauranga and what's the relevance between Rotary and World Values Day?
Well, first of all, Katrina, New Zealand is the first place to see the sun, and what better place to do it than Tauranga? Rotary's involved because, you know, we're an international values-based organisation that does good in the world, and that's really what World Values Day is all about.
That's true, it is. And today we have got some amazing things that we're going to show you. We're going to showcase some of the best values that we've got here in New Zealand, and we're going to have a panel discussion later as well, but I will tell you more about that soon. For now, what I think is really important is for us to give you a little bit of an insight into Tauranga and just how beautiful our city is, because we want to show it off. And then we're going to come back and we're going to speak to some amazing people from our communities who really represent values. And the first one up is
Cam Hill, and he's involved with Good Neighbour, does great stuff in our community.
So the Good Neighbour community was started by myself and a group of friends. I didn't know what we were going to do, so I began just walking around our street, looking for opportunities, reading our newspaper. So that's an opportunity, why don't we mobilise around that, why don't we get some people around that, and why don't we use whatever resources that we had to meet that need, whatever that might be. So it just started very practically, and then we added the food rescue component to it. Then we added our community gardens, and then we've developed our firewood depot. We have this facility here that we now have the ability to walk alongside our people, and then we have a commercial kitchen. And so, yeah, we're just growing in our response, I guess, to the community. So we developed a set of values. And those ones behind me, you can see there, we kind of just wrote those down. Those are some, and we're refining those, so we get our messages clear, and so we're really using those values to inform the next opportunity. So we have lots of people come to us and say, would you consider doing this? We have to kind of restrict it a little bit, say, hey, listen, you know, would love to do that, but really this is our main focus and this is what we want to do.
It's just about connection. It's about connecting people to each other, to the community, building relationship with people, building trust. You know, those words, responding with kindness, compassion and generosity, that's just what we live for now. It's what we do every single day, and we expect that everybody that comes through Good Neighbours doors gets that treatment.
We often say around here, one of our values is that we don't mind being inconvenienced to help people, right? Because, you know, when the need comes up, it's often inconvenient, right? I've got things to do, or got this to do, or got that. You know, we often say, hey, listen, we're going to put that aside and we're going to try and support and help. We believe we could sum probably Good Neighbour up in 3 words, maybe that's a big ask, is basically give, serve and make somebody's day, right? We all have something, you know how we all have something to give. And we need to be able to have an expression for that, an outlet for that. We always say here we are a river, not a reservoir. You know, we need to move these things on, right? So if you've been called to do something, get out there and do it. What's it going to take? It's going to take courage, and it's going to take intentionality. That's what it's really going to take. And so, you know, I want to inspire people, you know, who are thinking about doing something. Hey, you can do it, all right? Just take that moment, feel the little heart beating, and get on with it and see what happens. Leave those results and see what happens. Bring that forward, and you'll be surprised at what can be done with that. We vote in elections, right? We all care about the elections. We want someone to be mayor and all that kind of stuff. But when we volunteer, when we actually put ourselves in that place, we are voting every day about the kind of community we want to live in, right? So if we want a kind community, a giving community, a generous community, all those are great values, then guess what we've got to be?
So my suggestion to leaders and policymakers, global leaders and city leaders, is really around finding organisations in your community that do what they do really well, and bringing those organisations together so that they can collaborate and work together to create a better community for everybody, because they know exactly what's actually happening. They know the needs in the community. They know the people that need help every single day.
You know, take those values and instill them into the people around about you, and I believe 2023 could be a great year.
I don't know about you, but I absolutely love what Cam says about volunteering being the way of voting every day.
Yep.
But in World Values Day, I know that I've had a lot of questions about, well, how do you go about volunteering? Does it have to be through an organisation? Is it something that you have to register for and sign up for? Or do you just do what Cam says and get out and be a good neighbour? Like, what's your experience from a Rotary perspective? What's your advice?
Well, I mean, you can become a part of a service organisation in your community, but like Tauranga Rotary, we have our annual book sale, okay, and in order to do that and to raise the money to fund the projects that we do in our community, we have 70 volunteers.
Wow.
They're just people, and a lot of them are older people who are retired, that come along the 6 weeks prior to our book sale, and they help us put the book sale together. Without it, we wouldn't raise the $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 in order to put back into our communities. There's a number of initiatives, and like Cam says, I really like what he said, is about just, go, it could be your neighbour, it could be something you could do at a school, it could even just be picking up a little bit of rubbish on the way out and about, walking in our beautiful areas.
Yeah, I know. I mean, well, look where we're sitting at the moment. It probably looks to everyone on camera as if we've got a green screen, but this is actually where we live. Tauranga is one of the most beautiful places in the world. And we want to keep it that way. And we want to keep it as vibrant as it is today. So, and New Zealand has such an amazing culture for volunteering. And I think that's a lot to do with the fact that people really value their communities. And it's not just about giving to the community and those who are hard in need. There's a lot of values that come from volunteering as well, that could give back to you. You feel a sense of purpose and a sense of place. I mean, how do you see that from a Rotary perspective? Does it make a difference to the people who volunteer in the work that you do?
Yeah, well, Katrina, Rotary has a saying which is service before self, and I think that's really what it is about.
Okay.
It is just about, like, am I able to do something today? You know, and everything. So do I, can I take 5, 10, 15, 20, maybe half a day out of my life, or just at this moment, and serve somebody else? So, Rotary International, across the globe, that's exactly what we do. We make a conscious decision to find something that somebody else needs some support to do.
Fantastic. Now, let's think about this, because if we are going to do some volunteering today on World Values Day, then there's lots of different ways that you can do it. You can spend some time acknowledging and listening to other people's projects, and you can do that by logging on to worldvaluesday.com and being part of the Values-thon and attending some of those events. You can influence global leaders by being part of the Values 20 movement in Indonesia. But very simply, you can log on to our Facebook page or our Twitter page or our LinkedIn page, and you can tell us what values you hold dear and how you use them in your day-to-day life. Or you can just tell us about how people in your life use values and you think it's impressive. So I give that challenge to you, but one of the things that I'm really interested in as well, because it's quite a global conversation, is how we're embracing Indigenous cultures and our Maori culture in this country, and how we embrace Indigenous values. We've gone through a bit of a renaissance here in New Zealand in the last 5 to 10 years. How's that affected New Zealanders, and what are we going to hear from next?
Okay, so we're lucky enough to have Jackie Rollison-Steed, who is involved with the Māori Business Network and also local iwi. So she's going to tell us about some of the projects and the initiatives that they've got together in this local community to ensure that Māori are to the forefront, and so they should be. And alongside that, we're also going to have, lucky enough to have another performance by the Mangatapu Kapahaka group, and this is one of the schools that Tauranga Rotary support. So I'm really looking forward to that, Katrina.
Yeah, I know they helped launch us last year, and they're back again this year, and they're going to the national finals of the Kapahaka group, and we have got more than enough respect for them, and we just want to see them do well. So enjoy this next one, and we'll see you on the other side.
For Māori in particular, values are fundamental to all aspects of their life, and essentially it's how we interpret and make sense of the world around us and our relationships, and it's through our actions that we are able to personify or interpret those values when we connect with people, when we connect to the natural and spiritual world, and also to ourselves, because it's akin to our well-being.
Kapahaka in Māoridom is a key vehicle for us to express our narratives, our history, our beliefs and our values all at once in a creative form, namely that of the arts. When we're talking about our values and our things that are important to us, Kapahaka is that vehicle that we can express through to be able to bring that to life, or actually bring that to the forefront for the listener or for the observer. So Kapahaka for tamariki is really important because they're able to carry those stories, carry that narrative forward in a public forum with ease, because one, they are nurtured in our values from a very young age, and it doesn't stop as you get older.
So the community that I live in and was born and raised in is Tauranga in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Within my community I have a lot of whānau or family who have grown up here, and also what we do have within our community are our Māori businesses. There was a gap for our Māori businesses around capability and capacity building to get themselves started as small to medium businesses. So I am part of the Tauranga Māori Business Association and sit on the executive board there. And essentially what that association is designed to do is to meet the gaps to assist small to medium Māori businesses and larger to achieve their business goals. Business for Māori doesn't just extend to a profit related business. It starts from our whenua, which is our lands. It starts from our smaller communities, from our marae, the places that we gather as family. Whilst they're not legal business entities, they do work together collectively. For the Tauranga Māori Business Association, a lot of the framework or how we work is based on values. We call them ngā ora. We don't focus on just one value. We believe that multiple values create the connection and give it more richness as opposed to one value on its own. Our 4 core values within the Tauranga Māori Business Association, one is whanaungatanga, and whanaungatanga essentially just means relationships, a sense of family connection. So the importance of that value is that our businesses, our families, our maraes, they can feel connected and involved with the purpose of our association. Another value that we use is manaakitanga. So manaakitanga is hospitality, it's support. So underpinning that particular value is of being able to support and nurture the growth of our businesses and our communities to get to their aspirations of what they want to do and what they want to achieve. And then another one of our core values is Tauranga. So Tauranga essentially is knowledge, Māori knowledge at that. So our people, our communities, our businesses, they like to seek knowledge for intergenerational sustainability, not just for profit bottom lines, but essentially growth of their business that's intergenerational, that's sustainable both for their families but also for the environment and so forth. And then rangatiratanga is another one, another really important value, and that's around leadership. So developing our communities and our people and our businesses so that they can strive as leaders and continue being role models for their tamariki or their children going forward. And it's around strengthening their capability or their self-determination to be quite autonomous in their leadership as well. So, like most things, you can't take one value without the other. So if you talk about mana, for example, which is equates to integrity, you can't really have that without having manaakitanga. So that's around sharing. So it's, yeah, we always sort of work more multiply with values.
We are all faced with conflicts and in difficult situations across all cultures and all creeds and all people. One thing that Kapahaka promotes is the space in which to express feeling, whether it's a happy feeling or an angry feeling or a feeling of debate or people wanting to argue out a point. Kapahaka is about expressing narratives in various contexts. So how we utilise this art form of kapahaka to express our feelings, that is one way that we can address either personal conflict or conflict among our community, and in fact it is a sounding board for that type of emotion, especially that is wider felt within Māoridom on a whole. And kapahaka is often utilised in that fashion to be able to express our opinions, our narratives, our stories, our positions in any given context. If we had the opportunity to speak to international world leaders about the importance of values and leadership, it would be to live and lead by example. Pretty simple. Tamariki are so impressionable, and there's nothing that they miss. They don't miss a beat, from the way you walk to the way you treat them to the way you speak. They're very intuitive of the way people make you feel, especially adults, especially leaders. And so I think it's a good thing to ask tamariki what they think about leadership and what they like and what they don't like. But in essence, for tamariki Māori, we say if you have a good heart and you have a good spirit, the rest will fall into place.
When you look at values holistically and what they're designed to do, either for our environment or for ourselves, for our relationships, for business, for the economy, that's what makes it integral. That's the link that will change what policy sets out to do and actually meeting it. So bridge the outcomes of what that policy is supposed to do when it comes to whether or not it's in health, the economy, social sectors. The whole point is the whole bridge should be those values. The other thing too that's interesting for us as either individuals or an entity or business is our values might change depending on the kaupapa or the purpose that we're serving at the time. So different values may come into play at that time. There are a lot of organisations that implement values into their organisation, and they'll write it into policy and strategies or constitutions, but they don't necessarily go back and refer to those values. So essentially, with the values that you want to implement into your framework or into policy, they're not there as black and white words. That's something that you should retrospectively go back and continue looking at, that you can benchmark what you're actually doing and ensuring that you are utilising those values and implementing them in everything that you're doing. Otherwise, they're just taking up space on a piece of paper, aren't they?
I don't know about you, Robin, but I can never get enough of those kids in Mangatapu Primary School. I mean, they are the youngest kapa haka that competed in the Tauranga finals, and they got through to the national finals here in New Zealand. And I love what Tauranga says about the values that kapa haka represents, because people across the world only really understand the haka that happens in rugby, but a number of different values that come from our Indigenous culture, our tangata whenua, our people of the land, is so important to the culture that we have here in New Zealand. And I think that there's a lot that Jackie said as well that really reflects what makes us different in that sense in terms of how we use values.
I totally agree with you, Katrina. Those kids get to your heart, don't they? And and Tauranga and the parents, the amazing amount of support that they give those kids, getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning to do their makeup and put all of their outfits together, amazing. And Jackie also touched on there about values not being talked about but actually walking.
It's great that that's actually instilled in children from a young age as well.
Yeah.
So it's not just about the schooling of education because you need to go and you need to earn money and you need to own a home and you need to do this, but it's also that sense of belonging, and that sense of community and that sense of appreciation of nature, and all of those things are instilled using those Indigenous tangata whenua values. But it's not just our. Like we as New Zealand, we're the biggest island in the Pacific island communities, but we've also got cousins who live in different parts of the Pacific.
Yes.
And interestingly enough, we're going to hear from our Pacific communities some of whom are here in New Zealand, but they've got some challenges ahead of them and they've got ways in which they keep their cultures alive and their unique identities alive. Who is it that we're speaking to next, Robin?
We're going to speak to Mel Coddington, who is part of the Pacifica and the Bay Trust, okay? They're doing a great, amazing stuff with Pacifica children, right from primary school through into their secondary, and also parents, that are now living here and don't have the language. Amazing stuff.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, we will see you on the other side of that.
There's a Samoan phrase that says tu levar. And tu levar means to nurture the spaces, and to nurture the spaces between people and places and objects. And when we nurture the spaces between people, places and objects, we nurture those spaces with care and respect and generosity. Like I'm in a space here, and this is my mum's work, and this has been influenced by her family, you know, her whakapapa or her tupuna, and this is what is an object, or these are the objects that have influenced her, and it comes from them. So living in New Zealand as a Pacific person in the community, I think it's really important to understand and know that there are so many different islands and cultures and languages in the Pacific. We're all independent, but we are connected by the moana, so by Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, or the Pacific Ocean. So there's a lot of our ancestors and grandparents who came here in the 50s and 60s and laid the foundations for our families to come. And so there's a lot of reciprocity that happens with the families came here first, they worked in various places, they set up homes, they enabled other family members to come from different islands to then settle here in New Zealand. And I think that it demonstrates our values in a way that we're still continuously caring, respecting and loving one another, even though we are separated. Our values are still the same here as they are in the islands. We're all looking after one another. So we try to ensure that our Te Maiti understand their heritage and where they've come from. We have a Pasifika Festival in the Bay. We encourage and engage with schools in Tauranga Moana area so that the children, the Pacific children in the schools can celebrate their identity, languages and cultures of the Pacific. And in that space we want to ensure that the children's family are engaged in the school, so then the school learns about our culture or Pacific culture, and then the parents can feel a warmth within the school which encourages children at school. I think that when we think about dealing with adversity in our Pacific community, we tu levar. We ensure that we care and respect and have generosity towards one another. So for example, the Tongan eruption and tsunami earlier on in the year, we've got a Tongan community here. I've got a Tongan friend who's very close to my heart, and it impacted his family. It was a really tricky time for him because of the fact that there was no communication between Tonga and New Zealand, and so the families were quite frightened for their families in Tonga. One of the ways that we nurtured that space between this place, New Zealand and Tonga, and the people was we went to one of the schools here, Tauranga Girls College. The girls asked if it was okay to do a stationery drive, and so the community brought stationery into the school. The girls packed up packages, and then we helped to ship them to Queen Charlotte College in Tonga, and that was a way for us to show our love and care for our family in Tonga, or families in Tonga. In Tuvalu, which is a place where I spent a lot of time as a child growing up, we would often, Tuvalu is one of the lowest lying raised coral atolls in the world. It sits 2 meters above level, and that's the highest point. And I remember as a child we would go to the ocean side of the atoll, and I would just see a whole lot of rubbish. There was a lot of plastic bottles and just trash along the coastline. And it was quite significant to me because I thought to myself, we're in this teeny tiny island and we don't generate a lot of rubbish on this island, and we manage the rubbish that is generated on the island. And so I know that in nurturing our relationship with our families over in Tuvalu and looking at that, the garbage that's there that's not a result of their behaviour, one of the things that we try to do here, for example at our Pacifica Festival, is to ensure that we've engaged Waste Watchers, which is an expert company to come in to reduce the amount of landfill that we're sending to the whenua here, because we know that if we don't do anything about it, the actions of us here impact our families over in Tuvalu, and that is just, it's something that we need to be responsible for. Everybody needs to be responsible for, because there's some mindless behaviour, and that mindless behaviour doesn't think about the people that don't contribute to the pollution. So the advice that I would give the leaders who are meeting at the G20 in Indonesia would be to levar. Make sure that you're thinking about nurturing the spaces and between the places and the people and the objects that you make decisions for. Make sure that when you are making decisions that you consider care, respect and generosity towards the people, towards the places, towards the objects that are within those spaces. And when you take time to consider that, I think at the end of the G20 summit is just to ensure that one of the main things is to levar in particular with the people. Do you still have a relationship with the people? Like, the decisions that you make have to ensure that you still nurture the space with care, respect and generosity to the people that you are making your decisions for.
It's getting a bit windy, isn't it, Robin? Anyone out there that thinks that we're sitting in front of a green screen can be reassured. We are definitely on location here in Tauranga, and this beautiful background is absolutely stunningly real. But we have just heard from the number of different communities that live here, Pacifica communities and the work that they're doing, and our city is amazing at being able to house communities and allow them to really embrace their own cultures and their own belief structures.
Yes.
Other than with the Pacifica communities and the Maori communities, what other communities does Rotary work with, or what other communities do we have in our cities as well?
Well, first of all, we've had a lot of work to do with Multicultural Society, first of all, and that's around immigrants coming into our city, and there's a lot of work, and that's across the board, from English speaking to people who have other languages, as their second.
Do I count as an immigrant? I'm Irish, Scottish, Indian, Malaysian.
Well, you do.
So there's a few bits
and
there.
The fact that when you come to Aotearoa, New Zealand, there's a lot of colloquialism that goes on that people just don't understand. Okay,
yeah.
But aside from that, we also have our gender dynamics. Community,
trans communities, LGBT communities.
Yeah, which are really coming to fore, I think, in Tauranga, which is great because we're a growing city.
Yeah.
Rotary, Katrina, worldwide understands that in order for our organisation to continue and to serve the communities that we have, that we need to become more open to gender, to equity,
and embrace all of those different belief structures.
Yes, definitely.
You know, I'm really interested. Oh, isn't it Tauranga Moana Pride today as well?
It is, yeah, this afternoon, aren't they? Yeah, this
afternoon,
yeah, which is great.
Which is fantastic. So once you finish with World Values Day, you should probably pop along there if you're watching from Tauranga, and if not, I'm pretty sure they'll have a lot of interesting stuff online as well. But we're going to be hearing from, next we're going to be speaking to Shadrash Rolston, who's one of the commissioners here in Tauranga City Council. And one of the things that we want to do is we want you, no matter where you are in the world, if anything that we've talked about this morning has inspired you for conversation, then ask us some questions. Jump onto LinkedIn, jump onto Facebook, jump onto Twitter. All of those details will be available in the comments below or available on those sites at World Values Day. So if you can do that and ask us some questions, then we can put questions to any of the people that you've heard from. But I think that one of the things that I really want to hear from Shadrash today is, how do you bring all of these cultures together and create this uniting vision? So we're going to hear from Tauranga City Council just now, but then after that I think we're going to come back to you and talk to you about how that works globally for Rotary.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that.
Me too.
But for now, from this beautiful city, let's go and hear from the people who lead it.
Tauranga, our city, a safe anchorage for all, where the climate is good and nature is always knocking. Here we've found our place of belonging, like those who came before us, where we are the moana and the moana is us. As the tides change, for our city to thrive, it needs to change too. A growing city must grow with its people, and how we grow is up to us. Tauranga, together we can. Build upon the values that have always been. Come together to put the world we live in first. Connect through our similarities. Celebrate what makes us unique. And inspire all to thrive in our vibrant communities. Together, we can create the change our city needs. Kei a tātou te pai tawhiti. The future is all of ours. Because Tauranga, together we can.
We went through a process of engaging with our community. Previous councils have done that over the last number of years and struggled to pull those values together into something that was cohesive. So since we've been running the city as a commission, the staff and the council have worked and tested those values with the community, and the three values that come to the fore in terms of the way our community values its place and values its people is that they value the environment and what the environment does for us as individuals, but also as a community. They value inclusivity, so a community and a city that embraces people. And the third one is vibrancy. So and I think that's probably more future focused, in that they'd like to see a lot more vibrancy within our community and how people connect. So one of the values as a commission that we've focused on quite strongly is around inclusivity. One of the things that we've looking at testing and developing is using techniques, participatory democracy. And so at the moment we're testing an idea through a community panel for them to come up with solutions in their community, and we're working quite closely with them. Hopefully it'll be successful, and then we can start applying those types of techniques into other areas to help us collectively address some of the challenges and problems in our community. So those are some of the things that we're working through. When I think about our city, we're relatively young in age, in the sense that the first settlers came into Tauranga in the 1830s. But in the last 20 or 30 years, the place has just exploded. We've got huge development occurring, and we've got a lot more people wanting to come and live here. And from a diversity point of view, we've got a lot more cultures wanting to come and settle here in Tauranga. And so the role of the council is really to help facilitate. So I think probably the advice I would give to global leaders at the G20 summit in Indonesia this year is to think about the communities in which they lead and govern. And when I reflect on us here in Tauranga, a city of 155,000, and thinking about our community from this scale through to a global scale. I mean, this is just my assessment, is that they're interested in, they want certainty, particularly from an economic perspective, are looking for some stability and security for our communities here, and bridging that between communities locally and then also globally. Values are important for our communities, and at times some of those values can be different and sometimes they can conflict. But values are important in shaping the way our communities develop and grow, the way they evolve. And so values do play an important part in shaping communities and shaping societies.
So I find it fascinating listening to the journey that the commissioners have been through in Tauranga City, because the council itself has gone through so many changes, which must be really disconcerting for the population. So to have those values sitting at the centre of what they're building is so important, and it's really good to see that that is what this city is going to be founded on.
Yes, I would agree. And the other thing that I think is great is that they've offered to come along and to speak to the values on this day, which is awesome, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you've got any questions for Shadrash, then please let us know them, because I'll be speaking to him later on this morning. Now, we are going to be hearing from you about some of your advice to global leaders and your thoughts on what kind of impression that what kind of example we can set for people around the world and communities around the world, but also global leaders. How would you encourage other people to do that? Do you have to be part of an organisation to be able to have an impact, or what's your advice?
No, you definitely don't have to be part of an organisation to have an influence. Sometimes it is good to join a few other people. I think that you get heard better. But I keep going back to Cam, who opened the day, and the fact that just taking that step and doing something good in the world, making a comment, supporting something.
Yeah.
I think that's really where values, that's where it comes from the heart.
That's where it starts.
Yeah.
All right, well, with that in mind, we're going to cut to Robin and let her tell you about some of the advice that she'll give to global leaders, and then hopefully we'll be stepping into to our panel discussion. So see you soon.
The value that Rotary instills locally and globally would have to be service to others. I think as an organisation, wherever you are, you've seen some of the local projects that we're involved in, whether it be schools. So this is a project that Tauranga Rotary has supported along with our neighbour club, Tauranga Sunrise. Sailability is an organisation that gets people with disabilities in yachts and everything and out on a moana. What a beautiful thing to be able to do. Another area of our focus is environmental, ensuring that we look after our planet, and locally here we have our K Valley, but overseas there's a number of projects around ensuring that there's water and sanitation for people. Women and child health is really, really important. Again, also in times of war, Rotary is about finding resolution to peace. So Rotary clubs will, at the moment in Ukraine, are out there letting the rest of the world of Rotary clubs know how we can support them. So I suppose wherever you are in the world, there's a Rotary club that will be doing a project that is unique to their community. The other focus Rotary puts on when they're looking at supporting projects is sustainability. Rotary doesn't want to just go in and decide what should happen in that community. We want to go and get alongside the members of that community, find out the skills that they don't have, that we can support them to have. So when we leave a project, we want to ensure that it's not just going to be abandoned and not continue. So that's why it's really, really important for us to know our communities, okay, and do what they need, not necessarily what we need. So when G20 leaders are meeting this year in Indonesia, wouldn't it be great to take on some of Rotary's values? Okay, as a Rotarian, we look to ensure that all our projects are transparent and are the truth, that they're fair to everybody, and they leave good friendships or make good friendships, and they're beneficial to communities.
Robin, I think that was absolutely fantastic. We've got a little values champion here.
We do.
Chewbacca, say hello to the World Values Day team. He's been here keeping us calm all morning. You've got the best values, haven't you, Chewy? Yeah, doggos do. But I think that was fantastic, and it's really great to hear about how local values in the community can really influence people internationally.
Yeah.
And if Rotary can do it, I mean, it's not just Rotary that does it.
No.
There's organisations across the world.
Across the world, and the organisations that usually Rotary work alongside to ensure that we can, cover lots of projects.
Yeah. You agree with that, don't you, Chewy? I think that we should probably go inside and have a bit of a debate. We've got all of the wonderful people that you've seen on the films today, including myself and Robin, are going to be having a panel discussion. So if you haven't already posted a question for us, then please do. We will be live. We'll be responding to questions live. So please get involved. And if you do nothing else, jump online and support a cause that has got World Values Day 2022 as a hashtag, and tell the world about values-driven organisations, projects and people who really need to be recognised on this day. And Chewbacca will be one of them, because you're values-driven, aren't you, baby? Come on, let's go. I think he wants to get there quite quickly. Shall we?
We will.
Good morning and welcome to World Values Day again. You will have seen so many wonderful values displayed in the films that we've been playing for you this morning, and I am absolutely privileged to be here with the group of people who made them possible. Before we start our conversation, I'd like to pass to our Commissioner Shadrach Ralston and ask him to open in the traditional way that we do in Aotearoa.
Thank you. Morena tātou. Good morning. Just before we start, I'm just going to acknowledge everybody here in the room, but also you that are joining from your places of residence and joining us here today. And then I'll roll through into a karakia, which is just a blessing upon us here and upon you as we step through the panel discussion this morning. So. Tēnā tātou kua huitahi nei, I roto I tēnei whare, me ki kia koutou I tāpiri mai, I tāpiri tata mai, ki tēnei hui huinga, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. So I just want to acknowledge us all gathered here today and those that are joining from afar. Huri ake rā ki tō tātou maunga, kia mauao, me tō tātou moana e rere nei, kōrua tahi ka tuku mihi. Huri ake ngā whakaaro ki a rātou kua mene nei te pō, e ngā mate haere atura. Kia tātou te hungora, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. And just referring to our sacred mountain, Mauao, hopefully you can see that behind us, and our waters, the harbour of Tauranga Moana, and they both acknowledge you and us here today. We also reflect on those that have passed recently, those connected to you, those that connect to us, and we bid them farewell. And then back to us, the living, greetings. I'm just going to do a short karakia, a short prayer, a short blessing, just to kick us off this morning. Nō reira, kia nui tātou. I te atua, anei mātou, e koropiko nei mūta warawaro. I te atua ka tuku ngā whakamoimeti, ngā whakawhetai ki a koe. Mau manaakitanga katoa, manaakitia mai mātou, tia ke pai hoki tātou katoa i ngā ahuatanga e ngā kōrero, e kōrero he ake nei. Tēnei mātuina tine ki a koe, korore ke tuango tapu. Heavenly Father, we ask, thank you for your many blessings that you've bestowed and poured out upon us. We pray for your guidance and direction upon us all as we gather and we connect this morning. And we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Kia ora. Thank you so much, Shadrach. I'm sorry, I got your name wrong in the films as well. I will get it right. I think I'll stick with Shad. But thank you so much for that. And I do think it's important. People often have meetings on a regular basis and they jump into conversation so quickly. And there's something very important, I feel, about the karakia that just settles everyone and brings you into the moment so that you can be present. And I think that's really, really helpful. So I was explaining before that we have got 4 different conversations that we want to try and get through today, and you'll have heard from each of the panelists in their films. But the 4 that I think are pollution. How do we use values to deal with pollution? How do we use values to deal with conflict resolution? How do we use values in terms of creating generational sustainability? And there was a 4th that has completely slipped my mind. So I'm going to leave that one open, and then whenever it comes back in, we'll figure it out. But let's get on and start first. I'd like to start with you, Mel. And I must admit, I don't know if I want to start with you or whether or not I want to start with your mum's amazing artwork. Because one of the things that we talked about in terms of pollution was your experience of growing up in Pacific Islands. And just to remind some people from the audience some of that experience, but also tell us a little bit about your mum's yellow hat.
Whakalofalahi atu kia matolu usi, koe hingoa haku ko Mel. This week is Niue Language Week, and so as part of the celebrations for Niue Language Week, my mum's an artist. She's a walking art exhibition at the moment. She's got hiapo, so hiapo is distinct to Niue. And we thought that to celebrate Niue Language Week here, we would bring some of Mum's hats from her private collection and also her hiapo to exhibit at the Faulkner House at Historic Village. One of the hats, there are 16 of like 50, one of the hats is it's weaved out of plastic bags that Pack and Save used to have when you used to go there. And that kind of links to, as a child, I was really fortunate to grow up in Tuvalu. Every Christmas holidays when I was in high school, I would catch a flight from New Zealand to Fiji and then sail on the Pacific Island up to Tuvalu, or Funafuti, which is the capital of Tuvalu, and it's a really low-lying atoll, 2 metres above sea level. And I remember as a child in high school, going on adventures, and one adventure that we would go on would be to go to the ocean side where there's big massive waves, the open ocean, as opposed to the lagoon. And on the open ocean, on the coastline, I was taken aback by
there being so much rubbish. And there were plastic bags, there were bits of rope, there was other types of debris, and also plastic bottles. Like, it was really significant for a small island nation to have so much rubbish, and I knew that this doesn't sit right with me because of the fact that I don't think that population of the people living in Whanawhiti can produce so much rubbish. So I think about, I've seen and watched various documentaries that have talked about the gyres in the Pacific Ocean, which are the big rubbish bins, garbage areas that are in the Pacific that sit along the equator. And I know that rubbish is not the production of the people that live in Whanawhiti.
Yeah.
You know, it's a global thing.
So how do we deal with that on a day-to-day basis? Because obviously on your island you have to deal with the problem and clearing it up, and we see that in India as well. We see that in many countries where the oceans, this rocks up on their shores. But how do we deal with pollution and waste, and how do we do that in our neighbourhoods, like in our immediate spaces? Cam, you've got a lot of good practices. What can we do here in New Zealand to start reducing that? What are we doing? And then Chad, I want to come to you to say, and how's the council going to make it happen? Do we have to be strict and tell everyone they get, a smack on the wrist if they don't get things done, or do we inspire them with values? So, Cam, I'll come to you first, and then Chad.
Kia ora, everybody. My name's Cam Hill, and it's lovely to be part of the panel here today. Lovely to be part of Values Day. We're excited about being here in Tauranga, and it's an absolutely wonderful place to live, and we want to keep it that way. I grew up in Fiji as a young child, spent my first years there, and I know when I was living something in the villages, they used to take a lot of their rubbish down, and then when the high tide came in and out, it's all gone. That was one of the, at Te Valu, obviously. One of the funny things about, sort of rubbish and things like that, because on the riverways, when it really flooded, if you were downriver, you got all the goodies from upriver. You know what I'm saying? I mean, cows would float down and you'd just pull them out. That'll do me. That kind of stuff, right? So, but that's not what we're talking about today. It's we're talking about how it is that we can reduce our footprint. The things that we get rid of, and how do we do that responsibly? One of the things that we do is we go into backyards a lot and we help people with their rubbish. Often that's a big issue here in Tauranga with, what do you do with the packaging and the cardboard and all of that kind of thing. One of the things that we did do was that we applied to the council for a chipper. Now it just sounds like a piece of equipment, but in actual fact, we have gone into backyards and we've literally just put all the way, a lot of the prunings and all the wood and all that kind of stuff through this chipper, and then turned it back into compost again and put it back into people's backyards. Now that's just a little example of what we've been able to do there. And then when we go to places, we're educating people again. Hey, you can compost, and you can do this. It's just about educating and just talking with people and trying to explain to them that we can do things better, that we don't have to continue with the past, and that we are, stewards of this resource only for a little while.
But is that a preserve of the rich? I mean, when you're sitting with cost of living crisis and you're concerned about what you're doing, you walk into a shop and the cheapest product happens to have 500 different pieces of plastic wrapped around it, but it's the cheapest option. So do you deal with your cost of living, or how do you balance that in terms of your values, and how do you make an impact? Because that hand to mouth needs, how do we do that? And Jackie, I'm gonna ask you, because as Māori businesses, you consider the environment first and the land around us and our communities. What can we learn from these types of approaches, and how are these decisions? How do we deal with these decisions?
Tēnā tātou, ko Jackie Rolliston Steed tēnei. My name is Jackie. That's a pertinent and big question. I do like what Cam said though around that regenerative way of, essentially, I would equate that to a circular economy. So being able to go around a process of reutilising the products that we've already got. With respects to a Māori economy, I think the difference between a Western economy framework and maybe an Indigenous or in particular Māori framework is we focus first on planet, people, then profit. So the bottom line isn't about dollars and cents, it's around how we look after our planet and how we look after our people first.
Excellent, excellent. Well, it seems absolutely reasonable in the way that we should be working, not necessarily how we are working. But Shadrach, how do we do that as a council? What kind of challenges do you see there?
So I'll just give a couple of examples of what the council is doing in trying to be a better steward and partner, I think, with others around how we look after the environment. Probably 3 years ago, the council did go out to the community and start a conversation about how they were dealing with their waste and looking at various options. When they dissected what was actually in our waste and going to landfill, so this is residential people living every day in their homes, collecting their rubbish and then putting it in a bin. It'll get collected by a rubbish truck and then go to a landfill. 30% of that rubbish was actually biodegradable, so it was compost kind of waste. So we had these conversations prior to us coming into a commission role with the community about better ways to manage our waste. And since then, since the commission's been in place, we've started that process of separating. So trying to get the community to think about the way that it disposes of its waste, separating out what's organic, what's recyclable, and what we can't recycle, which would ultimately...
How hard is that to do, to get people to change that behaviour?
I think when we've looking at the statistics and the way the organisation's monitoring the volumes of rubbish, there has been a reduction, 30% reduction in the organics that would normally end up in landfill. So the uptake has actually been tremendous across the city, but we need to maintain that. We don't want to fall back into the pattern of it's easier just for me to chuck it in the
bin, yeah.
In the bin, and it ends up in a landfill.
Yeah.
The other thing that we're quite focused on is trying to provide the community with different types of options for moving around the city. So, climate change and carbon reduction. So we're thinking about how do we encourage people to use alternative modes of transport. Tauranga is pretty car dependent. We do have a public bus service, there are cycleways and there are footpaths that people can use, but trying to connect all that up together and encourage people to think about different ways they move, different ways they recreate and different ways they work.
And I suppose that comes back again, sorry Robin, I'll come to you on another question, but I suppose that comes back to, again, what to Valu you were saying about between the places and the people and the objects, that if you are using these alternative modes of transport, if you are out in the community and not just sitting in your car, then you will likely feel more connected to those environments and more connected to wanting to help them thrive. Do we have any questions about pollution or any questions at all from the audience or from anyone online, Chris? Not at the moment? No? Okay, I'm conscious of time and we've got a few more things to talk about, but with that in mind, let's talk about conflict resolution. There was something that Tauranga said within the section that we were looking at Kapahaka, where, Kapahaka is teaching our young people how to express their emotions, whether they are positive emotions or whether they're emotions of frustration or anger, and how to have those conversations. And I know from working personally in a political and geopolitical environment, we tend to go for diplomacy over everything else. We don't really know how to get angry with each other the further up the echelons you go. A lot of it tends to be say the nice words, to say the nice things, don't fall out with anyone. So there's a bit of me that wants to know what we can learn from our Tamariki, who seem to know how to do these things based on these good practices. Have we got any thoughts on that? And I'd like to come to Tauranga, but Jackie or Shad, any thoughts on how we do these things? How do we keep that in our cultures and keep those values instilled?
I'll probably just use one word, and it is a value, and that's utu. So that's reciprocity. So essentially, what you give back, or what you give, is what you get back. In other places, I guess it's karma. For uara, or for a value for Māori, that would be utu.
Utu. Very, very powerful.
Just from a Rotary point of view, internationally, one of our core values is around peacekeeping. So, that's really, really important to us. So in times of conflict, wherever in the world, Rotary goes in and works alongside people and other organisations within those countries to support peace, really. It's, really, really important, and it's not, just a little bit of kindness, generosity and friendship. I think those are really great words to get alongside people in areas of conflict.
And vulnerability as well, I'm assuming. I'm going to give you a cheeky question, Cam.
Yeah.
What does a bad neighbour look like? How do you deal with bad neighbours? Or are all your neighbours good neighbours?
Well, I've lived by some really rowdy neighbours. We all know what a bad party sounds like. And we know what good food smells like. Wafts out the windows, and it's great. And so, I can only share from my experience. I lived in a street. Like everybody else, and we tend to stick to ourselves a little bit. There is a sense in which we don't get to know our neighbours as well as we could do. So we know what a bad neighbour looks like, but sometimes it's not about what we do. Play loud music or do all that kind of thing. Sometimes it's about what we don't do. Mm-hmm. And I think we can be a bad neighbour by the sense in which that we don't introduce ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
or we don't take the time out to kind of find out who our neighbours are and what they're interested in, and how we can maybe share together in our street, and what we can kind of do. And so I think we need to talk about stepping those kind of things up as well. So it's we're not being particularly bad ourselves, but we're not doing what we could do to really make our neighbourhoods a better place. And so,
so there's that element of if you knew more about me, then you would focus on the nice things that you know about me, not just the places that we collide, essentially.
Yeah.
Because if that's the only time that we have conversations, then they're always going to be negatively based conversations.
Sure.
So that's quite, that is important. But it is challenging to get up and go outside and introduce yourself to a neighbour. Everybody's a bit shy.
It absolutely is.
How do you get the confidence to do that?
I'm not too sure, but we had some gang people move into a house two doors up from me, and they were there for about maybe a month. And I said to my wife, we haven't welcomed them into the neighbourhood. She said, you're crazy, you can't welcome them to the neighbourhood. That's the last thing that we want to be doing. So I said, no, you bake a carrot cake and I'll go and catch a trout and we'll smoke it up and we'll take it up to them. So that was, I think it comes down to courage and intentionality. You do have to feel that, we don't have to cross the ocean necessarily. We just need to cross the road.
Yeah.
We just need to, and do that kind of thing. And I guess it just comes from a heart of really wanting to, foster the value of generosity and sharing and compassion and kindness, So here's me with a carrot cake in one hand, a smoked fish in the other hand, and I'm walking up, my heart's beating like crazy. I'm thinking, this is not such a great idea anymore. Knock on the door, and I got quite a mixed reception, to say the least. But you know what? The next day, I was standing at my gate, and they drove out, and she waved at me.
Yeah,
and I thought to myself, I can't change what they do or how they participate or not participate in society, but I can change the climate in my street. And I think we can make a difference wherever we are through the simple acts of kindness.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, absolutely fantastic. We should probably move to the area, Chris, so that we can get a carrot cake and a smoked trout. Just saying.
I love trout fishing. It's not about me. It's about putting food on the table,
When you get into bigger circumstances, and Chad, I'm going to ask you a question about a recent incident. There was a fire at a building in one of our community buildings here. And there's discussion around it, and there's how it caught on fire and what have you. But it created a number of different conversations from factions of our community that have strong values in their own right, but they clash in certain ways. I'm wondering how, as a council, you mediate that and how you deal with that in order to make sure that everyone still feels inclusive, even although. Because usually these things happen as the actions of one or two people, not necessarily communities as a whole. But how does the council deal with that type of conflict resolution, and how do you use values to do that, or is it stay to your bedrooms, don't talk to each other? It's easier that way. What's the process that you guys go through?
So there's kind of two elements to understanding the needs, I suppose, of our community. One is we need to engage. So we need to get out there and talk to the community. So whether it's the rubbish curbside issue that I talked about previously, and then we also need technical information. We need to understand the types of waste that people are disposing of, and how that's collected, and then how we deal with it. So there's kind of two elements. There's the technical side, and then there's the people side. And we need both to be able to inform us, to be able to make good decisions about what's the best and what's the right thing to do. Ultimately, there's going to be a cost issue, so we need to balance that in the conversation as well, those conversations that we have with the community. But cost that cost issue is not necessarily just about for the financial costs. There is an environmental cost, there is a social cost, and a cultural cost associated with some of the decisions that we need to make. So we need to factor all of those things in and engage with the community. You are going to get quite disparate views. Those that think it's going to cost me too much money to separate out my waste and put them into these different bins, and then the cost of, so that physical cost to me. And then you'll get people that will say, well, we can't afford not to do that, and I'm happy to pay the cost. And the benefits that it provides back to the community and provides to the environment. So it's a balance of how do we get that balance?
How do you deal with the conflict, specifically in relation to conflict, when you get to sets of beliefs that clash and you find yourself as a council in the middle of that? How do you mediate that, and how do you use values to mediate that? Or do you just stay out of it and see what happens?
No, I think we need to take all of that into account. So one of those core values that the council and our community valued was caring for our environment. People, the inclusivity element was also really important, and then also the vibrancy. But in this case, when we're talking about waste, we need to make sure that our people are involved in those decisions and try and mediate, those tensions. But they also said the environment was their top priority.
It's about finding that common factor then, yes. I would suppose. Not always the easiest thing to do, but and some of those things take time. But no, thank you very much. Thank you very much. We have a few minutes left, and I'm wondering if we've got any questions at all from the audience on anything to do with conflict. And then, if not, then let's talk about how we, just to close up, some final thoughts on how we look at generational sustainability with values. How do we take the values of our of people from all generations and make sure that they're shared, and in Jackie's word before that, reciprocity, but also the circular economy idea of how we make sure that we don't lose good lessons. Any thoughts from anyone? Anyone want to volunteer to say something first? Otherwise, I'll pick on you. Robin, why don't we start at that end and work down? Generational sustainability. So how does Rotary make sure that the values that your members have used and have acquired and learned and practiced throughout your lives, throughout your professions, and now you give back to the community? How do we make sure that it's not just about you giving money, that you're actually giving that experience as well? And how does that work for you?
Well, I suppose we're Rotary. We were founded in 1905, and so we have our core values haven't changed. It's service to others, and service before self. So that's sustainable wherever you go. I mean, I think it's about kindness, friendship, all those words that we use transcend into any culture. Every culture has, a manaakitanga type feeling. So for Rotary, we're all about sustainability. Like as I said before, we don't go in and do what we think needs to be done in communities. Across the world, we go in and work alongside communities, ensuring for sustainability. Water and sanitation is really, really important. Environment is. We've talked about peacekeeping, maternal health and women, very, very important. Education and literacy. Without literacy, people, generations won't evolve. You give a dictionary to a child and who can't read, and it's a pictorial dictionary that Rotary has a scheme giving. So these students take the dictionary home to families as well, and you've got parents and other members in the family that don't read, but here's a pictorial book, dictionary that teaches not only that child, but in some cases the family. Rotary supports Duffy books in schools, and we go in and provide a number of activities both in schools and just in our general community. So I suppose that's about the generational thing. And we have generations of Rotarians. We have Rotaract Club, Interact Club. So it's about bringing back volunteering in our communities.
Very much like what you were saying, Cam, as well. But I like what you're saying about the fact that working with children and working through schools or in those educational environments, you've got to remember that actually that education does have a knock-on effect. It spills out to wider communities, and I think that's incredibly important. Shadrach, you mentioned on your film about the democratic participation processes that you were looking at, about bringing communities together. I'm wondering, is that generational as well? And how's that working? Can you provide some more information on that?
So in terms of the decisions that the council makes, we do need to engage with, from young to old. So we do need to hear from younger voices, and we do have some younger voices here in the audience.
Absolutely.
Because the decisions that we make will ultimately affect them, but also thinking through beyond us, so that intergenerational scale, but also thinking about the future. And coming back to those council's 3 core values, which is the environment first, inclusivity and vibrancy, and those core values underpin the vision, which is together Tauranga we can. So kind of that future focus of, we can be all that we can be. Tauranga, we can be caring, we can be prosperous, we can be. So that's the way the vision is set, and it is future focused. It's where do we want to be, how do we want our community to engage, how do we want our community to live, and how do we want to grow.
Okay, thank you. And Mel, what about from yourself in terms of the generational impacts and generational sustainability? I mean, your mother's art is a fantastic example, and I was talking before about the fact that I see that her granddaughter has started to learn from her work. Is that something that culturally is art a good medium for those types of things? What's your perspective?
I think that to live and nurturing the spaces and places and objects it's intrinsic in how we are as Pacific people, and so then it's intergenerational because we are all working together, we're living together, we are learning from each other, we're role modelling to each other, and there are certain processes on how we operate within the family system and within our villages. So everybody knows their place. We have church ministers, we have leaders of our villages, we have leaders of our community, we have people who have authoritative knowledge on things, and then we have mums and dads and we have children, and we're always trying to be aware of how we demonstrate or how our behaviours impact our tamariki. Yeah, and I think it's up to us
and the other way, we can learn from children sometimes as well.
Yes.
They can sometimes see things with fresh eyes that sometimes we miss because we've become a little bit, like blind to it in some ways. From a Maori business perspective, Jackie, how it sounds like it was quite challenging to get confidence into young businesses that were growing and thriving. Do you think that that's something that we've turned the tide on? Do you think that young people think, I could go into business myself now, young Māori? Or what's that intergenerational element like for Māori? Because I know that just speaking te reo only a couple of generations ago was frowned upon. So bringing that confidence back to not only embrace the culture, the language, and find the confidence to say, and now I can do business with these foundations, that's an amazing accomplishment. How can you reflect on that for us?
Yeah, definitely there's been a resurgence of the reo, which is beautiful. It's beautiful to see our rangatahi, being able to prosper in Māori spaces and being able to speak their reo, and where 2 generations above me, it was not only frowned upon, you were punished if you used a reo and kura. But it's nice to see that now, and it's beautiful that that's all translated through in kapahaka as well, because there's so many values and mātauranga that's incorporated into kapahaka. But just going back to that intergenerational around the economies, I spoke before about people, planet and profit. It was a little bit like what Shad said as well. When we get Māori businesses coming to see us, or even global Indigenous businesses, the concept is exactly the same. So when you think about strategic planning or business planning, we don't think just 3 to 10 year plans. We think 50, 100, 500 years. In advance, and that's what intergenerational sustainability looks like. So I would challenge our leaders that when they're writing policy, what do they want to see in 500 years? What does the planet need to look like? What do people need to look like in 500 years? And if you look that far forward, I think that you can start building those blocks to get to a more sustainable
I think that is really important, and all too often it's not just about profit that hinders you from doing that, because you've got a yearly annual budget that you need to put together, but it's also election cycles. People don't want to make promises or have ambitious goals for things that go beyond their election cycles, so that can create short-termism as well, which, as you say, restricts the number of people that you're going to talk to during that period. Whereas if you had those bigger visions that say, 50, 100, 500 years, then it becomes obvious that you have to involve tamariki. So I find that amazing. Thank you so much, Jackie. Really, really insightful. And Cam, I'm coming back to you for your thoughts. So that you can close for us, and then I'd like to invite Mike Savage up to just close this corridor for us. So and just end for us. But first, intergenerational. Do you get a lot of volunteers at Good Neighbour from young and old? And what kind of insights can you give us?
Thank you. When I started the charity, when we started Good Neighbour, one of the things that we wanted to do was recognise that we wanted a community which everybody could participate, right? Because as you know, everybody has 2 things: they have influence and they have affluence, and basically, you might not have a lot, but what you do have can make a big difference, And so we want to be able to encourage whatever it is that you have to use that. And so we've had children come to us and say, I've got lots of books at home, And I'm sure there are children in my neighbourhood that don't have books. And wouldn't it be great if we could package those books up and give them out to children and to families and to whānau, and they could be enjoying the books that I'm doing. So that mum come to us and said, this is, my 6-year-old has come up with this brilliant idea. And so we mobilised around that idea, and we used the charities that were coming to Good Neighbour, and we were able to get those books out into that space.
That's amazing.
And I wouldn't have thought of that. I don't know whether you would have thought of that, but a 6-year-old thought of that and thought it was meaningful. And I'm sure if we really asked some of the families, they would have thought that was amazing. And so it's just little ideas like that can inspire and can shape. And it's authentic.
It's
absolutely.
It's authentic kindness and wanting to share.
That's right.
And that authenticity, sometimes when it comes from adults, it can be mistrusted. Why are you giving me something? What do you want in return?
Exactly.
Whereas when a child wants to give, it's because they want to what do they want in return? Usually a smile.
That's it.
And I think that's absolutely beautiful. And I think that, the older we get, the more cynical we get, and actually bringing ourselves back to that core is probably
That's right.
Really important. So if anyone else has anything to add, then please do so now. And if not, Mike, would you mind coming up to help close the event for today? Yeah? Anyone? Oh, we're all good. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And
thank you.
Yes, Mike, if you want to, this information, all of the stuff that we've been doing today is being shared across the world, and we are hopefully going to be influencing the global leaders in Indonesia at the G20. So just to close with that in mind would be awesome. Thank you.
Kokari te manu, takari, I te ata, ko ao, ko awatia te hei Maui ora. Ko Mike Savage toku ingo, no Ngāti Pōneke ahau, ko Tauranga moana anai anei. Good morning, and thank you for the privilege of being here. Kia ora tamariki mā o Mangatapikura. Nice to see you again, and all of you that are here and those who are viewing this online. Welcome to Tauranga Moana. Ena rangatira, those of you in the panel, Robin, Shadrach, Mel, Jackie, Cam, and Karina, for being the advocate and the person who led this morning. So thank you so much. I'm so glad that I wasn't on the panel. The tricky questions that you asked, but the answers that you gave, it had me thinking, my goodness, how do we do what we've been asked to do? You asked the question of generations sustainability within Rotary. Robin answered that Rotary has been going since 1905. This man I'm looking at over here, he's been part of that since 1905. How does Rotary sustain itself? By not getting older, really.
Okay.
And it's by bringing young people like we have around the table over there into this organisation. While you were speaking, I was looking out the beautiful view that we have here, and those of you that are watching, you can see the view and I'm thinking, we've got the Pacific Ocean out there that brings all the nutrients in. It brings it into our harbour. It brings life into the city. And you're talking about, Cam, you mentioned about Fiji, being down the other end of the river and picking up. So we have two tides, the Pacific and the harbour here in Tauranga Moana, and it's bringing it all together that we make this city what it is. Jackie, I think you mentioned about looking forward for 500 years. I've only been on this planet for 68 years, and there have been so many changes. And we are moving so fast. So how do we impact on those who are in G20? is looking at the speed that this world has changed in 2 generations. So I don't mean to be preaching like this, but it's just picking up what each of you have said today. And the privilege of being here and listening to you. And I trust that as we leave this place that we will take with us the character of sustaining what we have, but also helping to bring to those of our tamariki who are here right now and those who are listening, to make this a world that we'll be so proud of and that we can help. God gave us this world to build and to sustain. So we need to bring into that His character, His strength to help us to do that.
Thank you.
So let me share in just a closing karakia. Kia tau, kia tātou, kia tau, kia tātou, sorry, let me get it right. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa. Te atawhai o te tātou ariki a ihu karaiti, me te whiwhinga tahitanga, ki te wairua tāpu, ake, amene. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, may the love of God and the fellowship and the peace of His Holy Spirit help us to do what you create us to do, and that is to look after your planet. Amen.
Thank you so much, and thank you very much, Mike. Thank you so much to my panel members. I hope that the experience hasn't been too fraught for you, and that we'll see you next year, and that we'll be able to take our voices again to the world and our values, and we can get updates on how things have been going. This year it's in Indonesia, next year it's going to be in India, the G20, and we want to be able to make sure that we can pick up maybe a few more Rotary clubs around the world who can do something similar as to what we're doing. But from here in Tauranga, this is the beginning of World Values Day. Hopefully we've given you a good start and a good start to the conversation. And over the next, I think, 40 to 45 hours, we will be seeing and enjoying learning about things around the globe. So if you want to join in with any of the events that are going on, then go to worldvaluesday.com and join in the Values-thon, and you'll be able to get involved in lots of different events. But from Tauranga just now, happy World Values Day, and we'll see you again next year. Thank you.